Think of the coldest you have ever been, the biting wind, the deep numbing cold. Now imagine that winter lasts for 6 months. Imagine there are no stores, no furnaces, no electricity. This was the reality for the native peoples of North America for thousands of years. But they didn't just endure it. They saw the winter not as an enemy, but as a teacher, and they learned its secrets. They discovered that snow could be the warmest building material on Earth, that a simple mixture of meat and fat could become a superfood that lasts for decades, that by wearing 2 layers of fur, they could create a personal climate so efficient it rivals our modern gear. Their greatest survival tool wasn't a tool at all. It was a story passed down through generations, containing everything they needed to know to not just survive, but to flourish. This is the story of the original winter scientists. This is the story of how they built a world of warmth in a world of ice. And this is the story we have almost completely forgotten. Until now. To the untrained eye, to the outsider, the arrival of a northern winter in the centuries before central heating and insulated Gore-Tex was a sentence of death. The world would seemingly die around them. The vibrant greens of the deciduous forests would blaze and fall, leaving skeletal trees clawing at a leaden sky. The endless rolling grasslands of the plains would bleach to a pale gold, then be buried under a featureless, blinding white expanse. In the Arctic, the sun would abandon the land for months, and the very sea would turn to a solid, grinding sheet of ice. The wind, no longer buffered by leaves, would become a razor, slicing across the landscape with a voice that promised oblivion. It was a time of profound silence and stark beauty, a season that demanded everything and forgave nothing. This perception, however, is a fundamental misunderstanding. For the hundreds of distinct Native American nations who called this continent home, winter was not an enemy to be defeated. It was not a void or a punishment. It was a season to be understood, respected, and utilized with a profound, intimate ingenuity that wove together architecture, ecology, and social science. They did not simply endure the cold. They mastered it. They built worlds of warmth within the heart of the freeze, creating shelters that were engineering marvels, clothing systems that outperformed modern gear, and food strategies that turned scarcity into abundance. Their survival was a testament not to brute force, but to intelligent adaptation, a deep and abiding conversation with the natural world. The foundation of this entire system was a philosophical cornerstone that is often overlooked in modern narratives, a deep-seated, reciprocal relationship with the land. The environment was not a collection of resources to be exploited, but a relative, a living entity imbued with spirit and intelligence. A hunter did not simply take a deer. He offered a prayer of gratitude and respect for the life that would now sustain his own family. A woman gathering birch bark for a wigwam would do so with care, ensuring the tree could continue to live. This worldview fostered a level of observation and understanding that was, quite literally, life-saving. They knew which south-facing slopes retained the sun's warmth longest, where the deer would yard up in deep snow for protection, how the behavior of the snowshoe hare predicted the severity of the coming winter, and the precise properties of every plant, animal, and mineral in their territory. This knowledge was not academic. It was the bedrock of existence, passed down through generations in stories, songs, and daily practice. From this foundational knowledge arose the 3 tangible pillars of winter survival, a triad of interconnected systems that we will explore in exhaustive detail. Shelter. Clothing and food shelter was the first line of defense. It was the artificial climate, the refuge from the storm. But these were not crude hovels. They were highly specialized structures, perfectly adapted to their regional environments. The iconic igloo of the Inuit was a masterpiece of snow engineering, its dome shape and wind-packed blocks creating a super-insulated space heated by body heat and a single oil lamp. The wigwam of the northeastern and subarctic tribes used a framework of saplings covered in layers of birch bark, reed mats, and animal hides, creating a portable, weatherproof home warmed by a central fire. On the Great Plains, the sedentary tribes like the Mandan and Hidatsa built earth lodges, massive, semi-subterranean structures covered in sod that provided incredible thermal mass, keeping them cool in the blistering summer and stable and warm in the bitter winter. Each design was a direct response to the local materials and climate, a perfect marriage of need and availability. Clothing was the mobile shelter, the personal microenvironment that allowed for travel, hunting, and work outside. This was not merely about covering the body. It was about creating a sophisticated, layered system of insulation and weatherproofing. The principle of using air as an insulator was well understood. Typically, an inner layer of soft fur, like rabbit or otter, would be worn with the fur facing the skin for comfort. An outer layer of tougher hide, like caribou, moose, or buffalo, would have the fur facing outward to shed wind and snow. The air trapped between these two layers and within the furs themselves formed a barrier that retained body heat with stunning efficiency. Specific garments like the Inuit parka, with its large, ruffled hood often lined with frost-shedding wolverine fur, or the knee-high mucklucks stuffed with dry grass, were the result of centuries of refinement, making them arguably superior to many types of early European winter gear. Finally, food was the fuel for the furnace of the body. The key to winter nutrition was not a desperate daily search, but a strategy of abundance built during the spring, summer, and fall. The autumn was a time of intense, community-wide activity. Large-scale buffalo hunts on the plains provided tons of meat that needed to be preserved. The solution was pemmican, a concentrated, non-perishable food made from pounded dried meat, rendered fat, and sometimes dried berries. This was the ultimate survival food. Lightweight, incredibly nutrient-dense, and capable of lasting for years. In the woodlands, the three sisters, corn, beans, and squash, were harvested and stored in deep-lined storage pits that acted as natural refrigerators. Berries were dried, fish were smoked, and every edible plant was gathered and cached. Winter itself was also a time for hunting and ice fishing, aided by the indispensable snowshoe, which allowed hunters to travel over deep snow that would immobilize large game. These three pillars, shelter, clothing, and food, formed the physical framework of survival, but they were all held together by a fourth, intangible, yet most crucial element: community and knowledge. No one survived a northern winter alone. The shared body heat in a lodge, the shared labor of keeping a fire lit, the collective wisdom of the elders, and the stories told to children during the long nights were all part of the social technology that was just as vital as any spear or snow knife. It was a holistic system, a way of life honed over millennia to not just confront the cold, but to create a rich, meaningful existence within its embrace. The architecture of warmth, shelter, and fire. If clothing was the personal fortress against the cold, then the home was the communal citadel. The diverse shelters built across the continent were not merely random assemblages of local materials. They were the result of meticulous observation, refined engineering principles, and a deep understanding of physics passed down through generations. They were climate control systems crafted from snow, earth, wood, and hide, the igloo, the mastery of snow. To the uninitiated, the idea of living in a house of snow seems paradoxical, a testament to desperation. For the Inuit of the Arctic, it was the pinnacle of efficient design, a life-saving technology that turned the most abundant and seemingly hostile material into a protective womb. The process began not with a haphazard gathering of snow, but with a critical assessment of its quality. Not just any snow would do. They sought out snow transformed by wind into a dense, compacted layer, pukak or apun, that could be cut into strong, interlocking blocks using a specialized snow knife, the panna. The consistency was crucial. It had to be soft enough to cut, yet strong enough to bear weight without crumbling. The construction itself was a feat of architectural genius. The blocks were not laid in straight rows, but in a continuous rising spiral. This created a perfect, self-supporting dome, a shape inherently strong against the relentless pressure of the wind. Each block was shaved and angled with precision, leaning inward to form a perfect parabolic curve that distributed weight evenly. The final key block at the top was lowered into place from the inside, locking the entire structure into a state of tensegrity. But the true magic of the igloo was in its finishing touches. The builder would crawl inside and meticulously chink every crack between the blocks with loose snow, sealing the shelter from drafts. A low tunnel entrance, dug below the level of the main floor, acted as a cold sink. Since cold air is heavier than warm air, it would settle in this tunnel, while the warm air generated by the occupant's body heat and the gentle glow of a soapstone oil lamp, the quillic, would rise and be trapped in the living space. A small ventilation hole was often poked near the top to prevent dangerous carbon monoxide buildup. The result was astonishing. Inside an igloo, the temperature could comfortably sit at 32 degrees 0 C or even higher, while outside the Arctic night could plunge to 50 degrees, 46 degrees, or lower. The snow walls, far from being cold, acted as a superb insulator, and the body heat of the occupants would even glaze the interior walls with a thin layer of ice, further strengthening the structure. For larger family groups or longer stays, multiple igloos could be connected by tunnels, forming a veritable winter village under the snow, complete with storage alcoves and communal areas. The wigwam and the longhouse, the insulated forests of the woodlands, south of the tree line. In the vast subarctic and northeastern forests, the primary building material shifted from snow to wood. Here, tribes like the Anishinaabe, Ojibwe, Algonquin, and Wampanoag perfected the wigwam from the Algonquin word for dwelling. Often confused with the more conical teepee of the plains, the wigwam was a dome-shaped, semi-permanent structure designed for winter comfort. Its construction started with a framework of long, flexible saplings, cedar, spruce, or hickory, which were driven into the ground in a circle and then bent and lashed together at the top to form a robust arched dome. This framework was then covered with a sophisticated multi-layered cladding. The first layer was often rolls of birch bark, peeled in large sheets from trees in the spring. Birch bark is waterproof, lightweight, and remarkably strong. Over this they would place mats woven from cattail reeds or cedar bark, adding a thick layer of insulative dead air space. Finally, for the winter, an outer layer of animal hides, elk, moose, or bear, might be added, or additional layers of bark and insulating boughs. The entrance was covered with a heavy hide door, and a smoke hole at the top of the dome could be adjusted with a flap to control the draft from the central fire. The combination of the small interior volume and the thick, multi-layered walls made the wigwam incredibly warm and secure against the howling winds of a nor'easter. For larger, more sedentary tribes like the Haudenosaunee Iroquois, the longhouse was the winter stronghold. These magnificent structures, sometimes over 100 feet long, were built from a sturdy frame of upright posts and crossbeams, clad in sheets of elm or birch bark. While their size made them harder to heat than a wigwam, they were designed for communal living. Multiple families, each with their own designated space along the central corridor, shared the warmth. Several fires running down the center of the longhouse provided heat, with smoke escaping through smoke holes in the roof. The collective body heat of dozens of people, combined with the shared fires, created a stable, if smoky, microclimate that sustained the community through the long winter. The Earth Lodge, the subterranean fortress of the plains. On the Great Plains, where trees were scarce but grass and soil were abundant, tribes like the Mandan, Hidatsa, and Arikara built the most permanent and imposing winter dwellings, the Earth Lodge. These were not temporary shelters, but substantial, semi-subterranean homes that housed extended families. Construction was a massive communal effort. First, a large circular pit was dug several feet deep. An incredibly robust framework of heavy logs and beams was erected over this pit, forming a large domed roof. This frame was then covered with a layer of willow branches or grass, followed by a thick waterproof layer of sod. The entire structure was then blanketed in earth. The engineering brilliance of the Earth Lodge lay in its use of thermal mass. The earth covering the lodge acted as a giant heat sink. In the summer, it kept the interior cool by absorbing heat. In the winter, having absorbed solar energy, it slowly released that stored warmth, maintaining a remarkably stable and comfortable temperature inside, often around 50 degrees or 10 degrees, regardless of the blizzards raging outside. The entrance was a long covered tunnel that served the same purpose as the igloo's entrance, trapping cold air. A central fire provided direct heat and light, and a smoke hole in the roof, often with a unique bullboat-shaped wind deflector, ensured proper ventilation. These lodges were so effective that they formed dense, fortified villages where people lived in comfort for the entire winter, storing their vast surpluses of food within the safety of the community. The pit house, an ancient and widespread solution. The Earth Lodge was a highly evolved form of an even more ancient concept, the pit house, used for thousands of years by cultures across the continent, from the ancestral Puebloans of the Southwest to the tribes of the Columbia Plateau. The basic principle was the same. By digging the floor of a dwelling below ground level, builders took advantage of the Earth's stable temperature, which remains around 50-55 degrees F, 10-13 degrees CT, just a few feet down. A simple log and beam framework over the pit was then covered with brush, bark, and a layer of earth. It was a simple, highly effective, and low-tech solution that provided exceptional protection from both winter cold and summer heat. The sacred hearth, the central role of fire. In every one of these diverse structures, the fire was the literal and spiritual heart of the home. It was far more than a source of heat. It was the kitchen stove, the source of light for crafts and storytelling, the dryer for wet clothing, and a sacred element around which the family gathered. The design of the fire was also sophisticated. In the igloo, the kulik, typically tended by the woman of the house, was a lamp, not an open flame. It burned rendered seal or whale blubber, providing a clean, steady, and safe heat source. In wood-based dwellings, the central fire was carefully managed. Hearths were often lined with stone, and the fire was banked with ashes at night to preserve coals for rekindling in the morning, a critical skill in a world without matches. The smoke that permeated these dwellings, while hard on the eyes and lungs by modern standards, served a purpose. It helped to cure and preserve meats and hides hanging from the rafters and acted as a natural insecticide. From the crystalline perfection of the snow igloo to the earthen bulk of the Plains Lodge, native architecture was a direct and brilliant dialogue with the local environment. It demonstrated that true shelter is not about fighting nature, but about understanding its laws and working in harmony with them to create a sanctuary of warmth, safety, and community in the depths of winter. The second skin, technology of clothing. A shelter provided a communal refuge, but it was clothing that enabled the individual to move, hunt, and work within the winter world. The garments created by indigenous peoples were not simply coverings. They were highly engineered, personal microenvironments, a second skin that often surpassed the functionality of the heavy wool and linen worn by contemporary European settlers. The creation of this clothing was a complex, multi-stage process that transformed raw materials from the land into a system of unparalleled insulation, waterproofing, and durability. The principle of layering and the science of dead air. The foundational concept behind northern indigenous clothing was not a single, heavy garment, but a sophisticated layered system. This approach is identical to the principle used in modern high-performance outdoor gear. The key insulator is not the fabric itself, but the air trapped within and between the layers. A typical system involved two primary layers. The inner layer. This was worn against the skin and was designed for comfort and moisture management. It was typically made from the softest, most pliable furs, such as rabbit, beaver, or otter, with the fur facing inward. The dense, soft pile created countless tiny air pockets that trapped body heat, while the leather side, tanned to a velvety suppleness, was comfortable against the skin. The outer layer. This was the shell, designed to protect against wind, snow, and abrasion. It was constructed from tougher, more durable hides like caribou, moose, or seal, with the fur facing outward. The outward-facing fur served a critical purpose. It caused snow and frost to beat up and fall away rather than melting and soaking the hide. The leather was often smoked or oiled to enhance its water-resistant properties. The genius was in the combination. By wearing these two layers, a space of dead air was created between them. This stagnant air acted as a superb buffer against the external cold, while the body's own heat warmed the inner layer, creating a stable, mobile microclimate, the art and alchemy of tanning. The transformation of a raw animal hide into soft, durable and rot-resistant leather was one of the most vital and labor-intensive technologies, a skill almost universally held by women. This process, known as tanning or brain tanning, was a form of alchemy. It began with the strenuous scraping of the hide to remove all flesh and fat. The hide was then stretched and dehaired. The central step involved breaking down the stiff, rawhide fibers. This was often done by applying a paste made from the animal's own brains, a perfect natural emulsifier containing oils and lecithin, which bonded with the collagen fibers to keep them supple. The hide was then worked for hours, stretched, pulled, and rubbed over a rope or dull blade in a process called softening. This physical manipulation was essential. It separated the individual fibers, making the leather soft and pliable. Finally, the hide was often smoked over a slow, rotten wood fire. The smoke infused the leather with creosote and other chemicals, making it highly water-resistant and preventing it from turning hard again if it got wet. The result was a material that was strong, breathable, wind-resistant, and beautiful, a perfect substrate for winter. Garments, a wardrobe for the cold, specific garments. And their genius thought the application of these materials and principles resulted in specific garments that were marvels of functional design. The parka, Inuit kulitak, atigi. This was the quintessential Arctic outer garment. It was typically knee-length, hooded and roomy enough to allow for air circulation without restricting movement. Its most famous feature was the large, ruffled hood, meticulously lined with fur from a wolverine, wolf, or dog. Wolverine fur was particularly prized because its unique guard hairs shed frost from human breath, preventing a deadly buildup of ice around the face. The cut was often tailored with gussets and shoulders that allowed for free movement of the arms for hunting and paddling. Mukluks and moccasins. Footwear was critical. High-top moccasins, or the boot-like mukluks of the subarctic and Arctic, were crafted from smoked moose or caribou hide with rawhide soles for durability. They were designed to be roomy. Before a journey, they would be stuffed with dry shredded grass or sedge. This grass was the secret weapon. It absorbed moisture from sweat, could be replaced with fresh dry grass when damp, and created a thick layer of insulation that kept feet warm even in extreme cold. The soft, flexible soles also provided superior grip on icy surfaces and allowed the wearer to feel the ground, an essential trait for hunters. Leggings, mittens, and robes. Leggings, separate from the breechcloth, were worn from waist to ankle, providing essential protection for the legs without the bulk of a single heavy garment. Mittens, always preferable to gloves for their superior warmth, were made from fur or hide, often with a removable liner. For the most brutal weather, immense robes or blankets were worn, often made from the hides of buffalo, bear, or wolf, with the fur serving as a formidable barrier against the wind. The power of the seamstress, women as technological innovators. The creation of this clothing was a domain of female knowledge, skill, and power. From the arduous task of tanning to the intricate art of sewing, women were the engineers of survival. They used sinew, thread made from animal tendons, for its incredible strength and because, when it absorbed moisture, it would swell and tighten the seam, making it nearly waterproof. The stitches themselves were a form of technology. Different stitches were used for different purposes, some for strength, some for flexibility, some for creating waterproof seams. The woman's ability to produce durable, warm, and well-fitting clothing was as critical to her family's survival as the man's ability to hunt. She transformed the bounty of the hunt into the very fabric of life, making her role not just complementary, but central to the mastery of the winter environment. The winter larder. Food. Preservation and procurement, a warm shelter and insulated clothing were meaningless. Without the caloric fuel to stoke the human furnace, the key to winter sustenance was not a desperate day-to-day search for food, but a sophisticated strategy of plenty, built during the seasons of abundance. The autumn was not a time of winding down. It was a period of intense, focused, and community-wide activity, a race against time to build the winter larder, a cache of food so nutritious, dense, and stable that it could sustain the people for months on end. This involved three key phases: the autumn surplus, advanced preservation, and specialized winter procurement. The autumn surplus, the foundation of survival. The entire annual cycle pointed toward the imperative of autumn. This was the time of strategic harvest, a period when the success or failure of a community's efforts could determine its fate. The communal hunts. On the Great Plains, this was the season for large-scale buffalo hunts. These were not casual undertakings, but highly organized events, often directed by tribal police societies like the Akichita of the Lakota. Using techniques such as the buffalo jump, driving herds over cliffs, or surrounding them in a pound, a wooden corral, tribes could secure hundreds of animals in a single coordinated effort. This provided a massive windfall of meat, hides, and bone, the raw materials for food, clothing, shelter, and tools for the coming year. Similarly, in the woodlands, communal deer drives or moose hunts were conducted to stockpile meat. The harvest of the land. In the agricultural societies of the Northeast and Southwest, autumn was the harvest. The Haudenosaunee and others gathered the three sisters, corn, beans, and squash, in vast quantities. These three crops were a nutritional powerhouse when combined, providing carbohydrates, protein, and essential vitamins. In the lake country of the Anishinaabe, wild rice, manumin, The good berry was harvested from canoes, knocked into the boat, and processed for storage. Across the continent, berries, blueberries, Saskatoon berries, chokecherries were gathered by the basketful. Advanced preservation, the technology of longevity. The surplus of autumn would spoil within days without preservation. Indigenous peoples developed methods that were so effective they are still admired and studied today. Pemmican, the ultimate survival food. Arguably the most nutritionally complete and portable food ever invented, pemmican was the staple of the Plains tribes but was widely traded and used. Its creation was a precise science. The meat. Lean meat, usually from bison, elk, or deer, was sliced thin and dried either in the sun and wind or over a slow fire. This created a lightweight, brittle product known as jerked meat. The pounding. The dried meat was then pounded between stones until it was reduced to a fine fluffy powder almost like coarse flour. This step maximized its surface area and digestibility. The fat. In a separate process, marrow fat and hard back fat were rendered over a fire into a liquid oil. This rendered fat was stable and would not spoil rancid. The mix. The pounded meat was mixed with a nearly equal weight of hot rendered fat in a hide bag or rawhide container. Often, crushed dried berries were added for flavor and a crucial boost of vitamin C to prevent scurvy. The resulting product was a dense, calorie-rich cake that was impervious to spoilage, could last for decades if properly stored, was lightweight for travel, and provided a balanced diet of protein, fat, and carbohydrates. It was the food that fueled winter travel and served as an emergency ration. Drying and smoking. Meat and fish were also preserved through simple drying. Long, thin strips of meat were hung on racks in the sun and wind to create jerked meat. Fish were split open, boned, and hung on similar racks, often in a smoky lodge or over a smoldering fire. The smoke and air circulation dehydrated the flesh and infused it with preservative chemicals that inhibited bacterial growth. Storage pits, caches. The preserved food and agricultural harvest needed secure, climate-controlled storage. The solution was the cache pit. These were bell-shaped or cylindrical pits dug deep into the ground, often lined with grass, hides, or birch bark. The stored food, dried corn, beans, pemmican bags, dried berries, was placed inside, covered with more insulating material, and then sealed with a layer of earth and sod. The consistent, cool temperature of the earth, just below the frost line, acted as a natural refrigerator, preventing spoilage and protecting the precious stores from animals and the elements. These caches were often located near winter villages or along known travel routes, serving as a reliable grocery store for the season. Winter procurement, hunting and fishing in the snow. While the stored larder was the primary food source, winter was not a time of complete inactivity. Hunting and fishing continued, aided by specialized technologies. The snowshoe. This was the single most important tool for winter mobility. By distributing a person's weight over a large area, snowshoes allowed hunters to travel swiftly and efficiently over deep, soft snow that would immobilize large game like deer, elk, and moose. The designs were region-specific, the long, narrow bear paw for wooded, brushy terrain, the large oval shape for open, powdery snow. On snowshoes, a hunter could pursue game that was floundering, making them vulnerable. Winter hunting strategies. Game was often easier to track in the snow. Hunters knew that animals like deer would yard up for the winter, gathering in dense stands of coniferous trees where the snow was shallower and food more accessible. This made them predictable if still challenging targets. Trapping with deadfalls and snares was also highly effective in the winter. Ice fishing. Fishing did not stop when the water froze. Holes were cut through the thick ice using antler or bone chisels and stone axes. Lines with bone hooks or gorges were used, or fish were speared with lysters, a multi-pronged spear with a central spike and backward-facing barbs. The ability to secure fresh fish provided a vital source of protein and variety to the winter diet. The winter larder was thus a multi-layered strategy. A massive, preserved surplus formed the bedrock of survival, while skilled winter hunting and fishing provided fresh meat and essential variety. This comprehensive approach to food security ensured that when the world outside grew silent and white, the people within their warm lodges were not hungry. but sustained by the deliberate and intelligent labor of the abundant seasons. The intangible fortress, community, knowledge and spirit, the Earth Lodge. The parka and the cache pit were the hardware of winter survival, but the software, the operating system that gave these tools meaning, context, and longevity, was the intricate world of community, knowledge, and spirit. This intangible fortress was what transformed a group of individuals facing the cold into a resilient, adaptive, and thriving society. Without this cultural core, the physical technologies would have been little more than temporary tricks, soon forgotten. With it, they became an enduring legacy. The winter camp, the social architecture of survival. The onset of winter triggered a fundamental shift in social organization. The dispersed bands of the summer and fall would often coalesce into larger winter villages or camps. This was a deliberate strategy of communal living, where the whole became far greater than the sum of its parts, shared labor and shared warmth. In a wigwam or earth lodge housing an extended family, the labor of survival was distributed. While some adults maintained the fire, others prepared food, repaired tools, or cared for children. The shared body heat in a well-insulated space was a direct, life-saving advantage. The calorie-burning work of keeping warm was a collective effort, reducing the metabolic burden on any single person. The security of the collective. A winter camp was a hub of security. Elders who held the most knowledge were protected from the elements. Children were watched by the entire community. If a hunter was injured or a family's food cache was lost, the community's shared resources provided a safety net that no individual could possess. This principle of reciprocity and mutual aid was not just charity. It was a fundamental, non-negotiable pillar of survival. Storytelling. The database of survival. The long winter nights, illuminated by the flickering fire, were the university of indigenous culture. This was the time for storytelling, an activity that was far more than mere entertainment. It was the primary mechanism for data storage and transmission. Lessons woven into narrative. A story about the exploits of a cultural hero like Glooskap, Algonquian, or the trickster coyote was not just a fable. Woven into the narrative were detailed descriptions of animal behavior, weather patterns, navigation techniques, and plant lore. A story might explain why the bear hibernates, how the snowshoe hare changes color, or what the specific habits of the winter moose are. This encoded ecological knowledge in a memorable, engaging format that could be easily recalled when needed. Transmitting history and law. Stories preserve the history of the people, their migrations, and their agreements with other nations. They reinforced social laws, ethics, and the consequences of greed, laziness, or disrespect for the natural world. By listening, the younger generation internalized not only how to survive, but why their way of life was worth preserving. They learned the values of courage, patience, respect, and humility required to live in a demanding world. Ceremony and medicine, maintaining balance. Winter was also a time of heightened spiritual activity. The ceremonies conducted during this season were not abstract rituals. They were practical technologies for maintaining the physical and spiritual health of the community, ensuring the return of life. Many midwinter ceremonies, like the Haudenosaunee Midwinter Festival, were deeply concerned with thanking the spirits for the past year's bounty and praying for the return of the sun, the renewal of the earth, and the success of the hunts in the coming year. These rituals reinforced the reciprocal relationship with the world, affirming that survival was a gift that required gratitude and respect. Medicine and healing. The knowledge of medicine was extensive. Herbal remedies, prepared from roots, barks, and plants gathered and dried in the warmer months, were used to treat winter ailments like respiratory infections, fevers, and frostbite. Sweat lodges were used for purification and healing, their intense heat providing deep cleansing and relief from joint pain exacerbated by the cold. The medicine person was a vital figure, combining the roles of doctor, psychologist, and spiritual guide to maintain the community's holistic well-being. Games and education, sharpening the mind and body. Even in confinement, life was not solely about grim endurance. The winter camp was a place of education and play, which were often one and the same. Games of skill, games like the snow snake, where polished wooden darts were thrown to glide vast distances along a trough in the ice, were not just pastimes. They honed the throwing accuracy and arm strength essential for hunting with a spear or lance. Games of strategy, complex board games, like the widespread stone game involving guessing the location of hidden marked bones, sharpened strategic thinking, memory, and the ability to read an opponent's subtle cues, skills valuable for both leadership and diplomacy, crafting and tool-making. The winter was the perfect time for the meticulous work of tool and weapon making. Men might chisel stone points, carve snow goggles from antler to prevent snow blindness, or fashion new snowshoe frames. Women would weave intricate baskets, repair nets, and create quill work or beadwork on clothing. This was not merely craft, it was the maintenance and improvement of the technological base upon which their lives depended. The intangible fortress was, therefore, the cultural engine that powered survival. It ensured that knowledge did not die with an individual, that morale remained high in the face of darkness and cold, and that every member of the community, from the youngest child to the most elderly grandparent, had a role and a purpose. It was this rich inner world of stories, ceremonies, shared labor, and communal warmth that truly allowed them to create a world of meaning and life within the silent, white expanse of winter. Regional masteries, a continent of adaptation. The story of winter survival is not a monolithic one. The strategies of the Inuit on the sea ice of the Arctic would have been useless in the pine forests of the Northeast, just as the earth lodge villages of the Mandan were ill-suited to the mountainous plateau. The true measure of indigenous ingenuity lies in the breathtaking diversity of solutions developed in response to specific ecological niches. Across the continent, nations demonstrated a profound principle. To survive, one must not simply be strong, but be perfectly adapted. The Arctic, masters of the coastal ice. Inuit, Yupik. For the Inuit and Yupik peoples, winter was not a season of scarcity but a time of hunting on the newly formed sea ice. Their entire survival system was calibrated for this reality. Shelter. The igloo was their signature, but it was part of a larger architectural repertoire that included semi-subterranean sod houses for more permanent winter settlements. Clothing. Their layered parkas, kolitak, pants, and kamik, boots, were sewn from caribou and sealskin. Waterproof sealskin was used for outer layers and boots, while caribou fur, with its hollow hairs, provided superior insulation. The sealing of seams with intricate stitching was a matter of life and death. Food. The winter hunt focused on sea mammals, seals, walrus, and whales. The seal provided meat, nutrient-rich blood, blubber for the quillic, lamp, and oil for cooking and light. They used the toggle-headed harpoon, a technological marvel. When a seal was struck, the head would detach and toggle under the skin and blubber, creating an anchor that prevented the seal from escaping through its breathing hole in the ice. Stored caches of meat and blubber from summer and fall hunts were vital, but the winter ice was an active, productive hunting ground. The subarctic, life in the boreal forest, Cree, Dean, Gwich'in, south of the tree line. In the vast expanse of the boreal forest, nations navigated a world of deep snow and dense conifers. Shelter. The wigwam, or a similar conical lodge covered in caribou or moose hides, was the primary mobile shelter. Its portability was key for families following the winter movements of game. Clothing. Here the moose and caribou were paramount. Clothing was tailored for deep snow travel with high, snug moccasins and leggings. The use of hareskin robes, requiring dozens of pelts woven together, provided exceptionally lightweight and warm insulation. Food. Survival depended on the caribou herds. The fall hunt was a critical, large-scale event to procure enough meat and hides. Pemmican was the staple food, stored in cache pits. Winter was also a time for trapping smaller fur-bearers like beaver and hare, and for ice fishing on the region's countless lakes and rivers. The snowshoe was, without question, the most important tool enabling travel across the deep, soft snows of the forest. The Northeast, the Woodlands and the Three Sisters, Haudenosaunee, Wampanoag, Algonquin. In the deciduous and mixed forests, societies balanced sophisticated agriculture with hunting and gathering. Shelter. The longhouse, Home to multiple matrilineal families was the winter fortress of the Haudenosaunee. The collective body heat and shared fires made these large structures habitable. Further east, the wigwam was common. Food. This was the realm of the Three Sisters: corn, beans, and squash. These crops were harvested in the fall and stored in large bark-lined storage pits inside the longhouses or in hidden caches. This agricultural surplus was the bedrock of winter survival, supplemented by dried venison, smoked fish, and a variety of stored nuts and berries. The diet was diverse and stable. Community. The sedentary nature of agricultural life allowed for the development of complex political and social structures, like the Haudenosaunee Confederacy. The winter was a time for council meetings, diplomacy, and the extensive ceremonial cycle, such as the Midwinter Festival, which reinforced social bonds. The Great Plains, nomads and village dwellers, Lakota, Cheyenne, Mandan. The plains presented two distinct winter adaptations: the nomadic horse cultures and the sedentary agricultural villagers. The nomads, Lakota, Cheyenne. After acquiring the horse, these nations became masters of the buffalo hunt. For winter, they sought out protected river valleys that offered wood for fuel and some shelter from the blizzards. They lived in teepees, which, when equipped with a sophisticated liner and an inner draft flap, created a double-wall insulation system that was remarkably warm with a small central fire. Their survival depended almost entirely on the pemmican and dried meat from the fall buffalo hunts. The village dwellers, Mandan, Hidatsa, Arikara. These tribes lived in permanent villages of massive earth lodges. Their winter survival was built upon a huge agricultural surplus: dried corn, beans, squash, and sunflowers, stored in deep cache pits within the lodges. This was supplemented by buffalo meat from one or two last hunts before the deep winter set in. Their fortified communal villages were veritable citadels of food and warmth. The Plateau and Great Basin. Ingenuity in arid lands. Shoshone, Nez Perce Ute, in the Intermontane West, with its cold, dry winters and scarce resources, survival relied on flexibility and ingenious storage. Shelter. The pit house was the common winter home. By digging a circular pit several feet deep and covering a log frame with earth and sod, they created a home that stayed above freezing thanks to the earth's stable temperature. Food. The strategy was one of dispersal and caching. Families often split into small groups to reduce the pressure on local food sources. They relied heavily on cached food: dried berries, roots like camas and biscuit root, pine nuts, and dried salmon and venison. Every few weeks they might travel to a new cache site, living off the stored bounty they had strategically placed across their territory during the abundant seasons. It was a mobile, decentralized approach to the winter larder. This continental tour reveals a fundamental truth. There was no single Native American way to survive winter. Instead, there were dozens of distinct, hyper-specialized ways, each a brilliant and hard-won testament to human ingenuity in the face of diverse environmental challenges. From the sea ice hunter to the forest trapper, the agriculturalist to the nomadic buffalo hunter, each nation wrote its own unique chapter in the epic story of winter. Survival echoes in the modern. World Legacy and Lessons, the story of how Native American nations mastered their winter environments, is far more than a historical chronicle. It is a living legacy whose echoes resonate powerfully in our modern world. The sophisticated technologies and the deep relational philosophy that underpin this survival offer not just historical insight, but also timeless lessons in sustainability, resilience, and innovation. The knowledge was not extinguished. It was suppressed, but it persists, influencing contemporary practices and offering a crucial paradigm for facing global challenges today. Direct. Influences on modern survival and materials science. Many indigenous inventions have been so effective that they were directly adopted by later arrivals and continue to be refined. The snowshoe. The fundamental principle and basic designs of the indigenous snowshoe remain unchanged. Modern materials, lightweight aluminum frames and synthetic decking, have replaced wood and rawhide, but the biomechanics are a direct inheritance. They are still the only practical means for traversing deep, soft snow without machinery. The kayak and umiak. The Inuit kayak, kajak, a sleek, decked hunting craft, and the larger, open umiak were marvels of marine engineering, perfectly adapted to the Arctic waters. Their design principles of a lightweight frame and a skin hull were so sound that they formed the basis for all modern recreational kayaks and many small watercraft. Insulation and layering. The indigenous principle of using dead airspace for insulation, achieved through layered furs, is the exact same science behind modern thermal underwear, puffy down jackets, and synthetic fleece. Their development of a layered clothing system is now the universal standard for all cold weather activities. From hiking to polar exploration, pemmican as a prototype. While not a commercial product, pemmican was the direct inspiration for modern emergency ration bars and high-calorie trail foods used by mountaineers and astronauts. Its formula, maximizing nutrition, minimizing weight, and ensuring long-term stability, is the gold standard in survival food science. The resurgence of traditional ecological knowledge, TEK, perhaps. The most significant legacy is the growing global recognition of traditional ecological knowledge, TEK. TEK is the cumulative body of knowledge, practice, and belief, handed down through generations by cultural transmission, about the relationship of living beings, including humans, with one another and with their environment. Scientists, climatologists, and land managers are increasingly turning to TEK as a vital data set that complements Western scientific approaches. Wildlife management, indigenous knowledge of animal migration patterns, population dynamics, and behavioral ecology, preserved in oral histories and direct observation, is now being used to inform and improve modern conservation models. For instance, Inuit knowledge of sea ice conditions and polar bear behavior is critical for understanding the impacts of climate change in the Arctic. Sustainable agriculture. The Three Sisters agricultural system is now studied as a model of sustainable polyculture. The symbiotic relationship between the plants, the corn provides a structure for the beans. The beans fix nitrogen in the soil for the corn, and the squash leaves shade the soil. Retaining moisture and suppressing weeds is a lesson in efficient, regenerative farming that requires no chemical fertilizers. Fire management. For centuries, many tribes used controlled, low-intensity burns to manage forest health, reduce underbrush that fuels catastrophic wildfires, and encourage the growth of desirable plants for food and basket making. The modern practice of prescribed burning is a direct, if belated, acknowledgement of the wisdom of these ancient practices, enduring cultural and spiritual legacies, the intangible aspects of winter survival, the community cohesion, the storytelling, the reciprocal relationship with nature, continue to be central to the cultural revitalization and identity of Native nations today. Language and story. Revitalization. Efforts to preserve and teach. Indigenous languages are also efforts to preserve the precise, nuanced vocabulary for describing the natural world, the dozens of words for different types of snow or ice, the specific names for plants at different stages of growth. This knowledge is embedded in the language itself. The philosophy of reciprocity. In an era of climate crisis and environmental degradation, the indigenous worldview of a reciprocal relationship with the natural world offers a powerful alternative to the model of domination and exploitation. The idea that humans are not separate from nature, but are a part of it, with a responsibility for stewardship, is a crucial lesson for building a sustainable future. Conclusion. A legacy not of survival, but of flourishing. To look back at the winter worlds created by the Inuit, the Mandan, the Haudenosaunee, and countless other nations is to understand that their achievement was not one of grim, desperate survival. It was a story of flourishing. They faced the same brutal cold, the same deep snows, and the same long nights that killed countless European explorers who arrived with inadequate strategies. The difference was a culture deeply attuned to its environment. They were empirical scientists, testing and refining insulation and structural engineering. They were master nutritionists, creating the perfect compact food. They were visionary ecologists, managing their resources for the seventh generation. And they were profound philosophers, understanding that human well-being is inextricably linked to the health of the community and the land. The legacy of their winter mastery is therefore a challenge to us today. It challenges us to look beyond simple, force-based solutions and to seek deeper, more symbiotic relationships with our environment. It reminds us that technology is most powerful when it works in harmony with nature's laws, not against them, And most importantly, it stands as an eternal testament to the power of human ingenuity, community, and respect. A powerful, enduring light in the heart of the long winter, the toolmaker's art. A deep dive into winter. Technology, the mastery of winter, was enabled by a suite of specialized tools, each the product of centuries of refinement. These were not crude implements, but elegant solutions to the complex problems of mobility, hunting, and daily life in the cold. The snowshoe, engineering for the surface. The variation in snowshoe design was a precise science. The large beaver-tail-style shoes of the Cree and Ojibwe, often over 5 feet long, were designed for powdery, deep snow in open areas, providing maximum flotation. In contrast, the narrower, shorter bear paw design used by tribes in more rugged, forested terrain like the Iroquois allowed for greater maneuverability among trees and in thicker snow. The intricate lacing patterns, made from rawhide babiche, were not random. They provided a flexible yet supportive platform that would pack the snow beneath it, creating a stable surface. The toe hole was strategically placed to allow a natural heel-toe walking motion, while the upturned toe prevented plowing into the snow. The crafting of a pair of snowshoes was a sacred art, involving steam-bending the wood, often white ash or cedar, and a lacing technique that could take days, resulting in a tool that was both incredibly durable and beautifully symmetrical. The toboggan, the land sled, for transporting heavy loads of meat, hides, or household goods, the toboggan was indispensable. Unlike a sled with runners, the toboggan's flat, curved bottom design was perfect for soft, deep snow. Made from thin, flexible boards of birch or tamarack that were steamed and curved upwards at the front, it glided over the surface with minimal resistance. The absence of runners allowed it to be pulled over uneven terrain, logs, and even bare ground without catching. It was the pickup truck of the winter woods, enabling the movement of entire camps and the fruits of a successful hunt. The ulu and the pana, the snow knife, and the women's knife for the Inuit. The pana, snow knife, was typically a larger, heavier tool made of bone, antler, or later metal, used for the critical work of cutting snow blocks for the igloo. Its shape was designed for both slicing and leveraging blocks. The ulu, woman's knife or ulu, with its distinctive crescent-shaped blade, was a multi-purpose marvel. Its ergonomic design allowed for tremendous force to be applied with a rocking motion, making it perfect for everything from butchering seals, cutting food, and scraping hides to trimming snow blocks from the inside of an igloo. It was an extension of the woman's hand, central to nearly every task of home and survival. Ice chisels and fishing implements. To access the water beneath the ice, a heavy-duty chisel was required. These were often made from a long piece of antler or a weighted, sharpened stone hafted to a wooden handle. The hunter would tirelessly chip away to create a fishing hole. For fishing they used lacers, a 3-pronged spear with a central, barbed point and 2 springy, opposing outer prongs that would trap the fish, or lines made of sinew or hide with hooks crafted from bone, antler, or copper. The spirit of the season, winter in myth and cosmology. Winter was not just a physical reality, but a powerful spiritual force, deeply woven into the mythologies and worldviews of native nations. The changing seasons were often explained through epic stories of balance, loss, and renewal. The theft of summer. A cyclical worldview. A common motif across many cultures is a myth explaining the origin of summer and winter. In many Algonquian traditions, the culture hero Glooskap or Nanabojo must journey to a distant land to confront a powerful being who is hoarding the summer, or to negotiate the release of the warm weather. In the north, tales often involved a struggle between the north wind or winter and the south wind or summer. These were not simple tales of good versus evil, but stories about the necessary balance of the world. Winter, though harsh, was a time of rest and introspection, a part of the natural order that made the joy of summer possible. Animal spirits and winter transformations. The behavior of animals in winter was often explained through myth. A widespread story among plains and plateau tribes tells of the snowshoe hare and why it turns white in winter. In one version, the hare was being hunted by a great predator and prayed to the spirits for protection. Taking pity, the spirits turned its fur the color of the winter snow, allowing it to hide. The hibernation of the bear was also a subject of deep spiritual significance. It was seen as a powerful creature that could travel to the spirit world during its long sleep and return, making it a potent symbol of death and rebirth. The winter ceremonials. Inviting the sun's return ceremonies held at the winter solstice were among the most important of the year. The Haudenosaunee Midwinter Festival, for example, was a time of dream sharing, cleansing, and renewal. It involved the stirring of the ashes of the communal fire, the white dog sacrifice, a prayer for purity, and dances meant to strengthen the sun for its return journey. For the Hopi and other Pueblo peoples in the southwest, the Soyalangu ceremony at the winter solstice marked the moment when the sun, having reached its southernmost point, was persuaded to turn back north, ensuring the continuation of the cycle of life. These were not mere superstitions. They were sophisticated ritual technologies for maintaining cosmic and social order during the most precarious time of the year. This concludes Part 9, The Spirit of the Season, Winter in Myth and Cosmology, approx. 13,600 characters. Part 10, A Test of Resilience, Confronting Colonialism and Climate Change. The sophisticated systems of winter survival faced their greatest challenges not from the environment, but from the arrival of Europeans, and later, the global phenomenon of climate change. The disruption of the seasonal, round colonial expansion deliberately attacked the foundations of indigenous winter preparedness. The near extinction of the buffalo by the late 19th century destroyed the primary food, shelter, and tool source for the Plains tribes. Forced relocation onto reservations often meant moving to lands without the necessary resources, the right trees for shelter, the familiar game trails, the specific plants for medicine and food. The banning of ceremonial practices and the removal of children to boarding schools severed the intergenerational transmission of knowledge, the very intangible fortress that had sustained them. Trade and adaptation, a double-edged sword. The introduction of trade goods like wool blankets, metal knives, kettles, and guns was integrated into existing lifeways, but it also created dependencies. A wool Hudson's Bay point blanket was a valuable trade item, but it could not match the insulating and moisture-shedding properties of a well-made caribou parka when soaked. While metal tools were a fantastic improvement, the loss of the knowledge to make stone and bone tools made communities vulnerable to the fluctuations of the trade economy. The modern threat. A warming climate today. Climate change poses an existential threat to winter-based knowledge. In the Arctic, thinning and unpredictable sea ice makes the traditional seal hunt incredibly dangerous. The warming temperatures cause traditional ice cellars, permafrost caches, to melt, spoiling tons of stored food. The changing migration patterns of caribou and other game, driven by shifting weather patterns, disrupts hunting schedules that have been in place for millennia. The knowledge itself, so finely tuned to a specific climatic reality, is becoming unmoored as that reality changes at an unprecedented rate. The architects of life, the central role of women in winter survival. The narrative of winter survival, the hunter returning with game, is often the focal point. Yet this was only the first step in a long, intricate process where the skill and knowledge of women became the difference between life and death. From the moment an animal was taken, women commenced a series of complex, labor-intensive operations that provided the community with shelter, clothing, and preserved food. Their role was one of profound technological expertise and economic power, making them the indispensable architects of winter resilience, the science of tanning, transforming raw hide into life-saving material. The single most critical and physically demanding task was the tanning of hides. This was not a simple chore, but a week-long chemical and mechanical engineering process, a sacred alchemy that turned a stiff, decomposing skin into soft, supple, and durable leather. Scraping and fleshing. The fresh hide was staked out, and using a scraper made of bone or stone with a serrated edge, tuki in some languages, the woman would meticulously remove every piece of flesh and fat. This required immense strength and precision, as any leftover tissue would cause the hide to rot. Dehairing and brain tanning. The hide was then treated to remove hair, often by soaking or applying a paste made from animal brains. The brains of the animal itself were almost always used, a perfect natural emulsifier rich in oils and lecithin. This was not superstition, it was advanced chemistry. The fatty acids in the brains bonded with the collagen fibers in the hide, preventing them from locking together and hardening as they dried. Softening and smoking. The final, most grueling stage was the softening. The hide was worked back and forth over a rope, a dull blade, or pulled by hand for hours, even days, until it became pliable and soft. This breaking of the fibers was essential. Finally, the hide was smoked over a slow fire of rotten wood, which infused it with creosote, making it permanently waterproof and giving it a rich tan color. A woman's skill in tanning directly determined the quality of her family's clothing, the comfort of their shelter, and the durability of their containers. The art of the seamstress, engineering garments with sinew and skill once. The hides were prepared. The woman's role as a master clothier began. Using awls made of bone and needles of copper or bone, she sewed with thread made from sinew, the tough tendons from along the spine of a buffalo or deer. Sinew was chosen for its incredible strength and a unique property. When it absorbed moisture from the air or sweat, it would swell, tightening the seam and making it nearly waterproof. Their stitching was a form of structural engineering. Different stitches were used for different purposes. Strong, overlapping stitches for areas of high stress like moccasin soles, fine, tight stitches for waterproof seams on boots and mittens, and flexible stitches for the gussets of a parka that allowed for freedom of movement. The creation of a single parka was a feat of patterning and design, involving multiple hides cut and sewn to create a garment that was roomy, aerodynamic, and perfectly insulated. A woman's reputation and status were often tied to her skill with the needle, as her work was the primary defense her family had against the cold. The mastery of food preservation and storage. While men hunted, women were the ultimate managers of the food supply. They were responsible for processing and preserving the vast quantities of meat brought into camp. The making of pemmican. This was primarily women's work. They were the ones who sliced the meat thin for drying, tended the drying racks, pounded the jerky into a fine powder using stone hammers, rendered the fat, and finally, mixed the ingredients together in precise proportions before packing it into rawhide bags, parfleche. Their knowledge ensured the correct ratio of meat to fat to berries, creating a stable, non-perishable, and nutritionally complete food. Drying and smoking. Women butchered the meat and prepared it for smoking or air drying. They also gathered, processed, and stored the vast majority of plant foods, berries, roots, nuts, and the agricultural harvest of the Three Sisters, ensuring a diverse and vitamin-rich diet throughout the winter. Cache management. Women often decided what food was to be stored, in what quantities and in which cache pits. They were the keepers of the winter larder, managing its distribution to ensure the family did not feast today and starve tomorrow. The keepers of the home and knowledge within the shelter. The woman was the minister of the interior. She controlled the central fire, the source of heat, light, and cooking. She kept the living space clean, orderly, and safe. But her role extended far beyond domestic management. She was a primary educator. As she tanned, sewed, or cooked, she taught her daughters the skills and knowledge that had been passed down to her. The stories she told while they worked were not just for entertainment. They were lessons in morality, family history, and the properties of plants and animals. She passed on the patterns for clothing, the recipes for pemmican, and the songs for ceremonies. In this way, she was the living library of her people. The essential link in the chain of cultural transmission that ensured survival knowledge was not lost. The survival of a family through a northern winter was a direct reflection of a woman's skill, strength, and intelligence. She was the vital converter of raw potential into sustained life, and her work in the realms of tanning, sewing, and food science was the bedrock upon which all other winter activities, hunting, trading, traveling, were built. To overlook her role is to miss the very engine of winter survival itself. Masters of the Ice, a case study of the Inuit of the Arctic coast. To understand the height of winter adaptation, one must look to the Inuit, whose traditional territory stretched from the coasts of Alaska to Greenland. For them, winter was not a temporary hardship, but the dominant reality of life, and their culture became a perfect mirror of the frozen, marine world they inhabited. Their survival was a holistic system where technology, spirituality, social structure, and knowledge were seamlessly interwoven. The environment. The frozen sea as a hunting ground. The central fact of Inuit life was the sea ice. Unlike inland cultures that retreated from winter, the Inuit moved on to the frozen ocean. The formation of solid ice, siku, was not a barrier but a platform. It provided access to the richest food source available, marine mammals. Their entire annual cycle was dictated by the formation, movement, and breakup of the ice. Key to their travel and hunting was an intimate understanding of the different types of ice. From the stable, landfast ice, tuvek to the dangerous, shifting pack ice, puktak, and the leads, cracks of open water. Kupak, where seals would surface to breathe. Shelter. The portable, life-saving igloo, while the Inuit used semi-subterranean sod and stone houses, karmak, for more permanent winter settlements. The igloo, snow house, was their masterpiece of portable architecture, enabling long hunting trips far out on the sea ice. Site selection and snow science. An expert builder would first assess the snow. The ideal was pukangnak, snow hardened by wind, dense enough to be structural yet soft enough to cut. The wrong snow could mean a collapsing shelter and death. The spiral construction. The builder worked from the inside, cutting and placing blocks in a continuous rising spiral. Each block was meticulously shaped to lean inward, forming a self-supporting catenary dome, the strongest possible shape against wind. The final key block was locked in from the inside. Climate control. The interior was tiered, with a sleeping platform of snow blocks at the highest level where the warm air collected. A low-entrance tunnel acted as a cold sink. A single quillik, soapstone oil lamp burning seal blubber tended by the woman of the house, could raise the interior temperature to just above freezing, creating a life-saving differential of 70 degrees, so 40 degrees C, or more from the outside air. Body heat would glaze the interior walls with ice, further strengthening the structure and reflecting the light. Subsistence. The marine hunt Inuit survival was predicated on the hunt for seals, walrus, and whales. This required specialized technology and immense courage. The seal hunt. The primary winter prey was the ringed seal. Hunters would patiently wait at a seal's breathing hole, igloo, sometimes for hours in the bitter cold. When a seal surfaced, they used the toggle-headed harpoon. This was a technological marvel. Upon striking, the detachable head would toggle sideways under the seal's skin and blubber, creating an unshakable anchor. This prevented the seal from sinking and being lost. Every part of the seal was used: meat and blood for food, blubber for the quillik and cooking, hide for ropes, boots, and kayak covers, and intestines for making waterproof parkas, the kajak, kayak, and umiak. The kajak was a decked hunting craft, a seamless extension of the hunter. Its design was so perfect for stealth and stability in icy waters that it remains the basis for all modern kayaks. The larger open umiak was used for communal whale hunts and for transporting families and goods along the coast. Clothing. The ultimate personal shelter Inuit clothing was a fully integrated system, arguably the most effective cold weather gear in the world before the 20th century. The parka, kulitak, made from caribou fur, which has hollow hairs providing superior insulation. The design was knee-length, roomy for air circulation, and featured the essential large hood ruffled with wolverine fur for its unique ability to shed frost from breath. The layered system, a two-layer system of inner and outer garments, both of caribou fur, created pockets of insulating air. The inner layer had fur facing the skin. The outer layer had fur facing out to shed wind and snow. Footwear, kamik. Boots were meticulously crafted from different materials. The sole was of tough, bearded seal skin, while the upper was of softer caribou leg fur or ringed seal skin. They were roomy to allow for stuffing with dry grass, ivrulik, for insulation and moisture absorption. Social structure and spirituality, the bonds that held the world together, Inuit. Social organization was flexible, with families coalescing into winter camps for cooperation and then dispersing in smaller units for summer hunting. The sharing of food was not just generosity, it was a fundamental survival law. A successful hunter distributed his catch throughout the camp, building social capital and ensuring that no one starved. Their spiritual world, or Inua, was animistic. All things, animals, rocks, the wind, the moon, had a spirit. Success in the hunt depended on maintaining a respectful relationship with these spirits. Taboos governed behavior to avoid offending the spirits of the animals they hunted. The angakuk, shaman, acted as an intermediary between the human and spirit worlds, helping to divine the location of game, influence the weather, and cure illnesses caused by spiritual transgression. The impact of change and modern resilience. The 20th century brought profound changes: the lure of sedentary communities, the introduction of rifles and motorized snowmobiles, and the suppression of language and spiritual practices. While this eroded some traditional knowledge, the Inuit have demonstrated remarkable resilience. Today, there is a powerful cultural revival movement. Hunters still go out on the land, Nunami, often blending traditional knowledge with modern technology. The Kulik is lit in ceremonies. The Inuktitut language is being taught in schools, and Inuit knowledge is now sought by scientists studying climate change. The Inuit case study stands as the ultimate testament to human adaptability. They did not conquer the Arctic winter. They learned its language, respected its power, and engineered a way of life that was not just sustainable, but rich and deeply meaningful within the heart of the ice. Winter highways, diplomacy and trade in the frozen season. The common perception of winter as a time of hunkered-down isolation is incomplete. For many Native American nations, the onset of cold weather signaled a shift in mobility, not its cessation. Frozen rivers became smooth, solid highways. Snow-covered marshes and rugged terrain were leveled by a blanket of snow, allowing for direct overland travel. This transformation of the landscape turned winter into a season for diplomacy, trade, and strategic counsel, activities that were crucial for maintaining the complex social and economic networks that spanned the continent. The transformation of the landscape. Rivers as roads, snow as a leveler, frozen waterways. In the warmer months, rivers were vital but could be dangerous for travel, requiring canoes and dealing with currents, rapids, and portages. In winter, these same rivers became the most efficient travel corridors imaginable. The Mississippi, Missouri, Ohio, and countless other river systems, along with the Great Lakes, became broad, flat, and relatively obstacle-free ice roads. A journey that might take days by canoe could be accomplished in less time by dog sled, toboggan, or simply on foot with snowshoes along the frozen surface. Overland trails, deep snow, impassable for much of the year, became traversable with snowshoes. Routes that were choked with summer undergrowth or broken by ravines were smoothed over, creating direct lines between points that were circuitous in other seasons. This allowed for communication and travel between villages that might have been effectively cut off from each other. The winter trade, a time for economic exchange with the harvests in and the fall hunts completed. Winter provided the time and the means for trading surplus goods. These were not casual meetings, but major economic events, often planned for specific times and traditional locations. The goods of winter trade. The trade items were a testament to regional specialization. From the north and west came high-value furs, beaver, otter, marten, and fox, prized for their warmth and beauty. From the agricultural societies of the southeast and northeast came surplus corn, beans, squash, and crafted items like Cherokee river cane baskets. From the plains came buffalo robes, pemmican, and salt. From the Great Lakes region came copper from Lake Superior and highly piped catlinite, so-called pipestone, from Minnesota, used for sacred pipes. Shells from the Gulf Coast, such as dentalium and whelk, traveled thousands of miles inland to become wampum and decorative wealth. The role of the dog, sled, and toboggan. These were the vital technologies of winter freight. The toboggan could haul hundreds of pounds of goods. In the subarctic and Arctic, dog sleds, kamutik, allowed for the rapid transport of people and valuable lighter cargo over vast distances. The efficiency of this winter transport made large-scale trade between ecological zones not just possible, but profitable. Diplomacy and council fires in the snow winter was the traditional time for politics. With the urgent tasks of planting and harvesting over, and with large numbers of people gathered in winter villages, it was the ideal season for extended council meetings. The Haudenosaunee, Iroquois Confederacy, the Great Law of Peace, the Constitution of the Iroquois Confederacy specifically called for council meetings to be held in the winter. The Royaner, peace chiefs, would gather in the central council fire of the Onondaga Nation. the keepers of the central fire. The long winter nights allowed for deep, uninterrupted discussion of matters of war, peace, alliance, and internal dispute resolution. The success of this confederacy, one of the most powerful and sophisticated in North America, was in part due to this deliberate use of the winter season for governance, renewing alliances, and resolving conflicts. For many nations, winter was a time to visit allies, renew treaties through ceremony and gift-giving, and settle disputes through negotiation rather than warfare. The shared warmth of a longhouse or earth lodge, the abundance of stored food, and the time afforded by the season created a conducive environment for diplomacy. The exchange of gifts, a beautifully tanned buffalo robe, a string of wampum, a pouch of tobacco, was a language of international relations, cementing friendships and sealing agreements. The social and ceremonial circuit beyond high politics. Winter was a season for social visitation and intercommunity ceremonies. Marriages were often arranged and celebrated in the winter. Multi-village ceremonies, like the midwinter festival of the Haudenosaunee or various medicine dances, drew people from surrounding areas. These gatherings were essential for maintaining the social fabric, for young people to meet partners from other bands, for news and stories to be exchanged, and for a shared cultural identity to be reinforced. A strategic pause for warfare. Paradoxically, while winter was a time for peacemaking, it could also be a time for war, albeit of a specific kind. The mobility offered by snowshoes made surprise raids on enemy villages possible. However, large-scale set-piece battles were rare in deep winter due to the immense logistical challenges of supplying a war party. A winter raid was often a swift, targeted strike, followed by a rapid retreat along the frozen trails. In conclusion, winter was not a dormant period in Native American life. It was a different kind of season, one of strategic movement and concentrated social interaction. The winter highways of ice and snow facilitated a vibrant exchange of goods, ideas, and diplomacy that connected diverse cultures across vast distances. This ability to turn a time of potential isolation into one of heightened connectivity and governance stands as yet another testament to the profound adaptability and sophisticated social organization of North America's first peoples.